Hey, Peter.
What's up?
Did you know that today we are recording the most important episode in the history of jazz podcast episodes that happen to be recorded in Grand Center in St. Louis, Missouri?
Yes, I did.
I'm Adam Maness.
And I'm Peter Martin.
And this is the You'll Hear It podcast.
Daily jazz advice coming at you.
Finally coming at you. We had some technical difficulties this morning.
Yes.
Then I had some technical difficulties with my jaw and mouth. And
Only
tongue.
five outtakes, but that's okay. Who's counting?
These spontaneous intros are hard to get spontaneous.
I know
man.
people think that we plot all this out and then come back with these little witty asides, but they
Nobody
don't.
thinks that.
No. Oh, they don't. Well, I'm sure it sounds like that to you guys, but there's a lot of work that goes into this.
Too much work that goes into it. All right, so it's not the most important. We might have just overstated that a little bit.
Oh, you think?
Yeah, but I don't know, man. There's not a lot of jazz podcasts out there, so it very well could be. This could change someone's life.
I mean, we hope so. We've been getting a lot of comments that people have actually been getting actionable advice from us, which I appreciate that people listen. And, it's getting us to step up our game to make sure that the action and the actionable advice is in the right direction.
Yeah, I know. We have this beautiful pod cave now with these beautiful new mics and the table, and we've got plenty of trail mix and coffee to go around.
Yep.
But you know what people really love is episodes at the old piano.
Kranick and Bach, our two guests today.
So we do have the Kranick and Bach available today because we might need it. We're doing an episode on 4 misunderstood chords and how to use them. Now, if you're a advanced player, this might be a little easy for you, or actually you might learn something and be like, oh, I'm not as advanced as I thought. Because some of these things I learned at an embarrassingly older age. As I'm like already a professional musician, I'm like, oh, that's what that really means. You know what I mean?
Hey, ABL, #ABL, always be learning.
But this is actually good because to talk about a little bit of the theory thing, like I think some people put way too much emphasis on chord and scale theory. I mean, you have to know the basics or whatever, but man, you don't have to like trip out over it because it really means nothing.
No, you just have to be able to play it and to hear it.
Right.
If you don't know it and can't spell it or explain it, that doesn't actually matter. That's actually bonus there. And sometimes we get that twisted and think, oh, whoever can talk about it. But when you go to a gig, you're not talking about the chords. You're playing the chords.
And I played with plenty of players that couldn't talk about the chords they were playing, and they were playing all the right stuff.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
So, but we are going to talk about a little bit of this stuff because these are chords that we get asked a lot about. We get emails about, and they seem to have kind of like a mysterious element to them. Maybe you know what they are, but maybe you don't know really how they work or what they're useful for. And so we're going to try to demystify some of these misunderstood chords.
That's
and we're going to hopefully tell you, the context when they're most often used. I don't want to say the context when you use them because you can use anything anywhere. Right. But these are kind of what these chords are designed for. So the first one is a very simple chord. This is a chord that I learned very early on, but I learned it the wrong way. This is the major 6/9 chord.
Major 6/9. You know what? I learned it the wrong way too. So apparently,
when I learned it, someone
St. Louis
said,
educational system has failed us.
Someone said, "Yeah, that's just a major 7 chord."
Right.
And it's not.
It's not.
It is not a major 7
It's
chord.
not. But I think people confuse it because you can use a major, the same scales that you could use.
Right.
But it's the same. It always goes back to this thing of like we're supposed to be using these tools not as theoretical concepts, but as tools to make music with, to make sounds with, and therefore they're not for us and they're not for somebody writing a textbook about jazz. They're for listeners. So the difference between a C major 6 and that was kind of a bland version of it, but a major 7 or major 9 is not huge, but it is.
It's significant. It's going to affect how the music sounds.
Yeah.
So a C major 9, just to break down the very, very basics of it, is based off the C major scale, off the Ionian scale, just like a C major 7, which is probably
What'd you call me? Oh, sorry.
Which is probably why this person told me, when I was 15 or whatever, oh, it's just a major 7.
This person, should we name names or
I'm
no?
not naming any names, but it was a trombone player, so I'll say that.
Okay.
But it's almost identical to the major 7, or a major 9 chord, except that it doesn't really have the major 9 in any of the voicings. The major 7, or sorry, not the major 9.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't have the major 7 in any of the voicings. That's not the strong tone.
Right.
The strong tone on this chord is the root.
Yeah.
That's what it's for. It's for when the root is at the top of the melody, or the root is strong. You don't want to have this chord with this on top.
Right.
You get that. You get that dreaded flat 9 sound. Well, you don't want the flat 9 sound. You want a clean sound.
Right.
And that's where this chord shines. So, in C, if you're going to do the most basic version of a C major 9 chord, you have the root on bottom, the third to define it as a major.
Yep.
The 6/9.
Yep.
The 9.
Nice.
The 5.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And the root on top. You know, the very first chord for on Green Dolphin Street.
Yes.
So if you're playing Green Dolphin Street and you play a major 7,
get off the stage, buddy.
please get off the stage. That's not correct, and it's not incorrect, but it's not great.
Right.
It's not the strongest version of that chord.
And again, it's not because of you're violating a rule of numbers 6, 9, 7, and all that kind of thing. It's because it sounds funky. And it's not even because it sounds like it's got some hostility in it, because sometimes we want that hostility,
sure,
but not at the beginning of On Green Dolphin Street, where it's very much like we're moving into the dramatic, areas of the harmony and the form later in the tune. So if you start with a kind of dramatic, not that it's the most dramatic sound, but it's a little bit clashing. Clashing is great, but it has to be within the function of the tune, the architecture, especially on standard tunes and stuff. There's got to be a reason for it, or else the listener is just like,
you
I
have
hate
to have
jazz.
intention with the clashing. It can't just be because you don't know how it works.
Yeah,
you know
right,
what I mean?
right.
And you know what's cool about the major 6/9 chord is that once you kind of understand its power and its use, it becomes a very hip chord. What might seem like kind of a bland chord because there's no major 7 or anything, it's very powerful. At the end of cadences, most standards end on the tonic.
Yep.
And so if you're ending on the tonic, you want to use this chord. And then you can also apply it to other, as a pianist, these voicings can be very handy for a Dorian sound. For, when you don't want to add the 9th to a Dorian, you can use the 6/9 chord from the relative major. It sounds great. There's a bunch of uses for this.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. What's our next one?
So next is...
Now that we've mastered the 6/9.
Now that we've mastered the 6/9. The next is the sus7 chord.
Okay.
So this is, famous chord. By sus7, we don't mean we suspend the 7th. It's usually a suspended 4th.
Right.
But it's the 7th chord.
So this would be like C7 parentheses sus4.
C7 parentheses sus4.
Although the 4 is often left off. I usually try to put that, but if it's like C7 sus or C sus7, the implication is that it's C7, C dominant 7 with a suspended 4th.
With the suspended, the 3rd is suspended to the 4th. That's so if you have like a C7 chord, you just move that 3rd up.
Yep.
Like that. This gets rewritten too as like B flat major 7 over C.
Yeah,
chord.
or G minor 9 or G minor 7 over C.
Yeah, or exactly, G minor 9 over C.
I like it. I like writing it like that. Yeah. It's a little bit different sound.
It's a different sound.
Yeah.
You
or
put,
function.
You put something in the player's head, right? That's G minor 9. You get all those G minor 9 things.
And you could move around too,
doing some G minor 9 kind of harmonic movements. That's great. That's a great point. But the essence of this chord, though, and this is where I think it gets confused. Unless it's marked like C minor sus4.
Right.
Some people treat this as a minor.
I know they get all modal
shouldn't.
on it.
No,
they get all minor modal.
This is a dominant chord. This is a mixolydian scale, C mixolydian scale. So the C dominant scale, and there just happens to be a 4th as the prominent note instead of the 3rd. But that 3rd is still in the scale.
Yeah. Well, I think isn't the best example of this that I'm thinking of is Maiden Voyage.
Maiden Voyage.
Almost every chord and the implication, and if you hear the way they solo, even before they start soloing and highlighting those thirds, maybe a little bit in a passing way, but it's always a major 3rd. It's clearly,
always a major. But man, I actually love the sound of that 3rd and 4th together.
Yeah. And that's the true suspended 4th. Actually, the other thing, that's the reason I like to call it a G minor 7 or B flat major 7 over C when it's more of a pedal point that it's a 5 chord going in and out of some things that's eventually going to resolve to a separate one. This resolves to itself.
That's right.
And to me, that way of spelling it, again, it's all about the sound, but that kind of better explains it.
You're basically putting a 2 chord over the dominant chord, right?
Right.
So if we're in C, and that's a C7, you're putting that G minor sound implied over, even though it's a C in the bass, over that thing. So you're giving that basically 7th to 3rd movement that you get in a 2/5.
Right.
You can have that.
And maybe a kind of vague rule on this could be like, you call it suspend. I'm definitely gonna get in trouble with the jazz. I might get in trouble with the university jazz police.
Don't worry about any kind of theory heads. I mean, this episode is inevitable for some emails, but
good,
whatever.
Good. Bring it, yo. No, but we're calling it a C7 sus 4, C sus 7 when the tonic, at least during that period, is really C. Whereas we're calling it a G minor 7 or B flat major 7 over C when the tonic is actually F major, whether it goes there or not. Like that could be a good sort of demarcation point.
You could demark it, but demark it. You could demarcate it that way for sure. But you could also, exactly. So if it's just C7 sus, these chords tend to get used, like in Maiden Voyage, in kind of a modal way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There was that whole era where that's what like everybody was doing.
Would you be referring to the modal jazz period?
But,
the oft mentioned?
But and still goes on today. It's a sort of without the third in there, it's an ambiguous sound.
Yeah.
And so you get these airy sounds. So, but it's not a minor chord.
No, it is not a minor chord.
It's a dominant chord.
Although, so occasionally we do see, I know that this is not on the official agenda, but excuse me, I'm a little hungry. I'm going to have some trail mix. Is that loud?
No, that's cool, bro.
Sorry.
I mean, it's your time.
Is this on your keto diet?
It is not on my keto diet.
got a little hungry, not going to lie. Okay. No, the minor, I don't know if that's official, but occasionally you'll see that.
You'll see C minor 7,
but to me,
sus 4.
That's a minor 11
That's
chord.
just a minor 11 chord. That's what I feel too. But
Yeah.
maybe they just don't want the minor third in there. But C7 sus or any 7 sus, that is for sure a dominant chord on most people's brains.
Yeah.
I think.
All right, let's move on. So now that we've mastered those two, let's go to the altered. Can that be
the
number
altered.
3? Yeah.
I remember once being young and someone asked like, "Hey, do you know what notes to play on an altered chord?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course I do."
Right.
I didn't.
No, of course not. Yeah, I really didn't understand this for a long time too because, I think it's not explained correctly because a lot of other people don't know it.
No one knows it
Yeah,
until you get to like a more advanced level. But yeah.
And actually, I'm not a huge fan of. Well, I don't even know. Maybe I don't know it correctly. I see the altered. We talking about scales of chords. No, I can't even remember now.
So I mean, this is misunderstood chord.
Right. So I see that as sharp 9, flat 13, sharp 11, a sharp 9. I said sharp 9 already.
It's basically any extensions that can be altered or altered.
But all of them, like I always think of it as like all of them. Like you shouldn't call it, like if you want a C7, sharp 9, flat 9, or C13.
Yeah.
That's not altered, but with a sharp 9, like that kind of sound. That's not altered.
That's not altered.
Yeah, but some people's like, oh, it's any combination. It's got to be all of them. The flat 13, the sharp 11, the flat 9, and the sharp 9.
Because there is a corresponding scale. It's the altered scale. And all of those things, the 9th is both flatted and sharped.
Yeah.
The 11th is sharped, and the 13th is flatted. And, of course, you have the dominant 7 and the minor 3rd.
Yeah. And I'm like, otherwise...
the major 3rd.
Yeah, I think it's just important when you're writing something out or playing something that you describe it as accurately as possible. And that's the sort of sound. I mean, not that you can't play a 13 and all those different kind of things, but in terms of the tonality of it, it's a very specific thing.
So I know you don't like to think of it like this. You have a very specific way to think about the altered scale. But for me, when I really started to understand it, it was unlocked because of melodic minor harmony.
Yeah.
So it's the melodic minor scale, a half step up. So
no, it's not that I don't like to think about it. I just didn't learn it like that, so it's not. I'm so much into scales based upon the root of what the chord is.
Totally, yeah.
But I love that correlation, and I think that's why it's such a specific sound and why I hear it because of that melodic minor. That's like I guess technically the ascending melodic minor, and because that sound was so ingrained in me that I always hear that sound, and that's why I'm just like, no, don't change the altered chord because if you're using that kind of sound, it's fine. There's other things you can do.
Yeah.
But one other way I do think about that scale, though, not necessarily melodic minor, but is as a half whole diminished up until there.
That's right. I remember.
And then
you
the whole
thinking
tone.
That, yeah.
That's actually kind of how I learned
like
it.
half whole tone, half whole.
Exactly.
Man, that would rack my brain at this point because I'm so ingrained in this melodic minor that if I could see that and I could see how that would really make it click.
Yeah.
But it's so funny when the way you learn these things affects how you view it for life.
Yep.
But yeah, so again, just to break it down a little bit, this is like a C7 altered. You would play a C altered scale, which is a D flat melodic minor.
Yep.
So if we just play the D flat melodic minor, it sounds like this. Right, that's a minor 3 and a natural 7.
Yes.
So starting on C with those same notes, it sounds like this.
Yeah.
very, very tense scale.
Yeah.
Meant to resolve to any kind of chord. These are especially effective to minor chords.
Exactly, and that's where we often see them.
Yeah.
But you can certainly use it going to a major if you want it to be a little bit of a surprise too.
But because it has that and that, the tritone kind of going, it really works. Like, so if we're C7 altered to like an F minor, that's where I think you would mostly play it.
Yeah, and I mean, places where it's often used incorrectly is when you don't have the altered ninth or the 13th or the raised fifth or whatever in the melody or what somebody's playing.
Right.
And then you're getting a clash on and some people will be like, oh, good, that's double clash. It's like, no, it's already built into it. Just play that. Because, like, say this.
Yeah.
Reach down and play a C for me. We can't actually both reach So that has a lot of tension, but it's a different kind of tension.
Yeah,
so that's a what?
Flat 9, sharp 11.
Yeah,
a common with a 13. Common voicing and a common tense. Yeah. But that, with all of these alterations,
go to major too,
probably to major because it has that A in there, A natural. But with all of these, man, the more tense they get, the more you have to be aware of the melody.
Yeah.
And if you're a comper behind, a soloist, you really shouldn't be dictating that as much as what you're hearing them do. If you hear them go altered, you go altered.
That's
but
right.
if they're playing a Mixolydian scale,
that's right.
Try not to step on them with a bunch of
It's like what Michelle Obama
stuff.
said: when they go high, we go low. Oh wait, no, it's the opposite of that.
No, when they go high, we go high with them. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so our last one, the fourth misunderstood chord and how we can use it. This is a pretty big, broad topic, but these are slash chords.
So these are chords that you would typically hear since it's around Halloween time now, in a slasher movie, right?
No,
different kind.
I mean, this is any chord. You kind of alluded to it when we were talking about the 7 sus chords.
Yep.
That you can spell any chord, especially chords with lots of extensions. Sometimes they're just easier, or they are easier to communicate, or just simpler to spell out as a slash chord.
Yep.
Now, a slash chord is usually spelled with, or is always spelled with, a chord is the first thing. So if we're saying B flat over C, then the C, the second note, is not a chord at all.
Right.
It's just one note. It's just the bass.
How about have you ever seen these? What's your feelings on when it's like C7 plus 5 over B major 7?
I'm like, what are you doing? What do you pick a chord? There's a way to spell that. To me, is more confusing because the point of writing out these chords is to make it simpler. It's to
explaining the sound.
It's to communicate the sound. And if you're making me do all that, like, that's I get it. Sometimes you have to do stuff like that, but in general, you don't have to. So, so the first letter over, like, if it's like G minor 9 over C, that's an actual chord. That's the chord. That's going to tell you what scale you're going to pick.
Yeah.
The second letter is just the bass note.
And that's the most important part, is the fact that the chord is the first part. Like, that's what I want I think we want everyone to understand. The second part is, although it may be the tonic, it might be the dime, it could be a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And certainly the one I showed first is one of the simpler ones, but the chord is always what the chord is.
The chord is, and this is actually a way that a lot of, like, especially modern jazz composers get to some really weird sounds. Like, you could do like a F major 7 sharp 11 over a F sharp. I've seen that.
Yeah.
Which sounds like this.
Yeah.
F sharp is not in F major 7 sharp 11, but when you put it in the bass, now you're running a whole scale over a whole bass note that is completely clashing, and it's an easy way to spell that. How would you spell it if it was just an F sharp chord?
No, it would be ridiculous. I mean, you could do it, but it wouldn't be actually representing the function of because really that's clashes and sounds crazy, but if you put it as part of a progression.
Exactly. So you're just pedaling with that F sharp, and and that's where you would see it a lot.
Yep.
You would see it maybe move the whole thing as a sound.
Yep.
But as an improviser, just know that first chord you see, that's what you're using, with the bass as like a consideration.
Yeah, and this is an oversimplification, but in general, if you're a bass player, ignore the first part and just look at the second. And if you're a horn player, just look at the first part, ignore the second part.
Until you really master how these sounds come about, that's your hack.
And the way you master is sit down at the piano and play it.
Totally.
I mean, we have an advantage, obviously, as pianists, but everyone can learn these chords, and then you get the sound, and then you can incorporate it into your improvising. And for bass players, as you learn the upper structure of the actual chord and harmony, you can, of course, incorporate that into not just playing the pedal point.
Absolutely. Great advice.
We mastered it.
We got
Hails
it.
yeah.
So you know what? Actually, if anybody has any suggestions for chords that you really don't understand or even concepts, when we're sitting here in the pod cave, we got access to the Cranach and Bach.
It's a little awkward. Maybe we can. But we're working on it.
Well, we can move the table around and experiment.
We're getting there.
But we're happy to kind of go through these. I think it's a good thing to sort of check.
Yep.
And if we did anything wrong, I'm sure we'll hear from you.
Yeah. And
you'll hear it.